Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Well, the stakes are well and truly heating up as we arrive at our final 8 Primarchs. Yesterday we saw the arrival of Alfarius and Mortarion as they went up against Conrad and Lehman Russ. So first up, the result of Alfarius versus Conrad. And well, this one was taken by the Night Haunter with 77% of the vote, which is a result I'm on board with. And for those wondering about Omegon, I did consider including the twins as one, but honestly, I just thought it would be too much. Sure, they're a bit smaller than their brothers, but they're still Primarchs, and Alfarius has given a good account of himself against Russ and Dawn, like I said. I honestly think the two twins together would be too much of an advantage. Next up we had Mortarion taking on Lehman Russ. An interesting encounter, but once more the Wolf King proved victorious, and this was exactly the same result with 77%. So today that leaves us with Conrad taking on Corax, Magnus taking on Jagatai, Russ taking on Vulcan, and the Lion taking on Sanguinius. Oh man, what a collection of matchups. Things really have heated up. So let us begin with the grudge match. Conrad versus Corax. Man, it is safe to say there's no love lost here. The Night Haunter and the Raven Lord have an interesting history, to say the least. And this began all the way back in the early days of the Heresy series, in the novel The First Heretic, at the betrayal of Istvan. As Corax was unleashing his fury on Lorgar, beating him from pillar to post, it's the arrival of Kurz that forces Corax to retreat. And initially, it has to be said, it really does come across that Corax is almost afraid of Kurz. However, thankfully this was more or less retconned, or at least rationally explained, in Corax's future novels, explaining that taking on 2 Primarchs at once would have been suicide, and that he doesn't fear Kurz, he fears that he could end up just like him, and that Corax very much does believe that he could take him on in a fight. And really this is a much better explanation, because no Primarch fears another. Even a pre-heresy Lorgar going up against the Prime Sanguinius wouldn't fear the encounter. And their relationship is further developed in Kurz's Primarch novel The Night Haunter, where we get to see Conrad's side of their rivalry. Here Kurz believes that Corax was the true master of shadows, and he hated him for it, the jealousy gnawing at his mind. If you haven't read Conrad's Primarch novel, I really do recommend it. There's a fantastic scene between himself and Corax in it, a real tense standoff between the two brothers. And it's exactly how you'd expect a confrontation between the two Lords of Night to go. These two Primarchs, so similar in so many ways, both wielding their lightning claws, both claiming ownership of shadows. I'm really quite torn on how this would go. Kurz has his premonitions of futures to come, and of course the madness that gives the ability to risk things a sane mind wouldn't. However, Corax is cold and calculating, and he has the ability to truly mask his appearance, quite literally disappear, let alone becoming one with the shadows. I just don't know which way this one could go. It's going to be fun seeing which way you guys vote. On to Magnus versus Jagatai. 2 best friends torn apart by the heresy to come. Magnus v Jagatai, a true clash of styles. the swordsman versus the sorcerer. Now this would play out fairly similar to Magnus's duel with Russ, and the previous round matchup of Magnus taking on Angron, with Magnus very much trying to keep the Khan at a distance. Now while Jagatai may not have Angron's ferocity, he most definitely has the advantage in speed and swordplay. And it's not to say he doesn't have a temper, because he most definitely does, as anyone who's seen him storming the corridors of the Imperial Palace can testify. Jagatai has a passion for battle that goes above and beyond, yet he never allows his fury to overwhelm his mind, such as an Angron, though let's be fair, it's not exactly Angron's fault. And while not a psyker by any stretch of the imagination, we have seen Jagatai display some form of his psychic ability, in appearing to conjure weapons of purely psychic power. But how would that relate to Magnus's attacks? We don't know. Now Magnus, for his part, again would rely on his spells and psychic abilities to keep Jagatai at bay as best he can. The question is, could he do it enough to prevent the rain of attacks Jagatai would be launching his way? And I do think it's worth mentioning here that maybe I neglected to mention before, Magnus can use his powers for defense just as much as offense, equally able throwing up shields to ward off attacks as to counter his enemy. And we've even seen him take on a Baneblade before, so his hardiness should really not be underestimated. This is a tough one to call, because my gut says Jagatai as the far more lethal Primarch. But my mind says you really can't underestimate Magnus. I do normally listen to my gut, but this is a tough one. Next we have Lehman Russ against Vulcan. Now this is a fight I'd never thought I'd see, but there's no doubt about it, this would be an old school dust up. Frost sword and axe against Warhammer. Russ would have the advantage in skill and speed, and of course his legendary temper. But Vulcan has the power and the strength. Russ would have to use all of his tricks when up close with Vulcan, or he'd risk being bear hugged to death, or even thrown around like a ragdoll. But I do think Russ does have enough in his locker to be prepared for that occasion. Like I said before, Russ is a brawler by nature, and he's smart enough to know he's easily outmatched in the strength department. He'd do his utmost to do all his damage with sword in hand. But should the worst come to the worst, he'd have a few tricks up his sleeve. The deciding factor as ever comes down to Vulcan's healing ability. Could Russ deliver a blow strong enough to wound Vulcan enough to keep him down and out, at least long enough to be declared the victor? We know which way I'm leaning, so I'll leave that decision up to you. And lastly, oh man, what a matchup. Lion L. Johnson going up against the Angel Sanguinius. Man, I wish we could see this duel. What a fight it would be. Two of the most skilled swordsmen out of all the Primarchs. The Lion, as we've discussed, is an absolute predator. If there's one Primarch who could go against the Angel without any doubt or remorse, it's him. He would treat Sanguinius the same as any enemy, and offer him no leeway. The Lion is a master swordsman, and he could engage Sanguinius as his equal in that regard. And as we have discussed previously, the Lion has defeated Kurz, which is a testament to his skill alone. Yet even more so when we consider that Conrad shares Sanguinius' gift of prophecy. so we could use that as a reason to nullify that advantage for Sanguinius, though its advantages are obvious. If you were to think that alone is all Sanguinius has in his arsenal, you'd be sorely mistaken. Sanguinius could match the lion for skill, but his true key to victory is the rage that lies beneath. Sanguinius isn't feared as a warrior for skill alone. It's because, as Russ duly puts it, in him there is a fine blend of skill and fury. He is a Bazark in angel's garb. It's the rage that Sanguinius possesses, combined with that skill, that makes him such a threat. He is the perfect balance. This would be truly fire against ice. The fire of Sanguinius, the ice cold of the lion. Would the cold, calculating lion be enough to stop the angel? Or would the fire and rage of Sanguinius be enough? But as always guys, the links to the polls will be in the description, so make sure to get your votes in. I'm going to enjoy some much needed family time over the weekend, but we'll be back with the results and the semi-finals on Monday. Huge thank you to all my subscribers. Your support really means a lot to me, it truly does. And if you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.